After Hours on Twitter at After Hours CBS, or you can find me on Twitter at A-Law Radio. What are you thinking about the game? How you looking forward to it? And what are you going to do for a party? Before you listen to our show, of course, our Facebook page is available to you as well. We spent time with a trio of Hall of Famers on Radio Row. So it was Hall of Fame Thursday. Derek Brooks from the Buccaneers, who's a Super Bowl champ. Andre Reed of Bills fame, 4 straight Super Bowl appearances. And then the newest member, one of the newest members of the Hall of Fame class, Orlando Pace, who, unlike the others, did not show up in his gold jacket. But it was really neat to get his perspective, because this time last year, his emotions, they were a completely different place. So I started out by asking him how it felt to be on Radio Row for the first time as a Hall of Famer.
It's a lot different. Last year when I was coming through this whole process, you know, you're nerve-wracking. Everybody's asking you, how do you feel? And to get through that process and actually be here as a Hall of Famer, it's great. This weekend is a lot less stressful than the past couple of years.
How was that phone call? What was that like?
It was great. Even today, words really can't describe what that moment really meant. Just to see David Baker, you know, knock on the door and tell you that you're a Hall of Famer, words still can't describe it. I'm still kind of floating high until that next class is announced. So I'm still pretty excited.
The speech, the weekend at Canton, what do you remember of it?
Wow, it's almost seems like a blur now. I just remember just getting up there, and it's funny. You practice for 6 months on the speech.
Did you? Did you practice?
And then you can't remember, you can't remember what you said. So it's kind of like everything's happened so fast, and it was a great experience, not only for me but for my family, and to get to share that moment with my boys was really special.
You are obviously a guy who spent most of your career with one franchise, the St. Louis Rams, and now they are in L.A., Orlando. So that process of them picking up and leaving St. Louis, where you were part of a Super Bowl champ, them going back to Los Angeles, what's that been like for you? Wow,
it's been really different. To accept my Hall of Fame ring in L.A. was really different. But one thing about Ram fans is there's a lot of L.A. fans that really supported us even when we were in St. Louis. So those guys came out and you know, they still followed us. So it's exciting to still see guys that know us and recognize us that for those guys who played in St. Louis. So Ram fans are Ram fans, and they're great to be around.
You played with the greatest show on turf, so you blocked for Kurt Warner. And you, by the way, is he nervous waiting for his call potentially?
He's probably nervous. You know what? I texted him. I said, Kurt, this is your year this year. He texted me back like, hey, you never know. I'm like, dude, this is your year. You're supposed to be excited. But I understand that process, and I'm sure the nerves are kicking in now because you really don't know, you know, how that day is going to turn out. But I think he has a pretty good chance of getting in this year.
So you blocked for him. You blocked for Marshall Faulk. And it's interesting because these two teams that we're about to see, and just the NFL in general now, has become so much more of a pass-first scoring offense. How much does it remind you of what you guys did in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Wow, you see the passing game, the way it's evolved over the years, and our system, the greatest show on turf, man, we like to throw the ball deep downfield, and the league has turned into a passing league, and you don't see running backs getting a ton of yards now, but everybody wants those big chunks of yardage, and I think we're a part of that. When you look back at NFL history, you'll see the greatest show on turf and how much fun we have, how exciting our offense was, and it'll be a part of NFL history.
Orlando Pace is a former Ram, but also spent a year with Chicago, Hall of Famer from this last class, with us here after hours on CBS Sports Radio. The Super Bowl that you won was the 1999 season. I had Solomon Wilcots tell me yesterday that nothing is normal about the Super Bowl, that the process itself resembles nothing like you've ever seen. So the process, the circus, the hype, what do you remember about that?
Wow, you know, when you look back on it, everything, you know, again, everything seems like a blur, but it was the game was almost secondary to everything else. Media day, family, friends, all that stuff, the excitement of the game. But I couldn't wait to get back on the field and actually hit somebody, because then that's when it starts to feel like football again. And then after that first hit, then it's a normal game. But just all the, you know, media day leading up to everything, all the, you know, publicity, all the interviews you have to do, it's just something that you really have to deal with. But both of these teams enjoy that at this point. To be here in this point in the season, playing for a championship, that's what every team wants to do.
The distractions are only greater now. We've got players making six figures for doing Facebook Live videos in a locker room. So, Orlando, how do you do it? If you have a player from, say, the Falcons who've never done this before, asking you, How do you focus? How do you stay in the moment? What do you tell them?
Wow, you really just you got to understand. The first 2 days, once you get this media day done, and now it's a big event. It's on Monday night, so it's kind of open to the public and everybody to see. So
just as crazy,
right? So once that gets down, you really have to stay focused, stay grounded. Hopefully you got your ticket situation out of the way early. I would tell a lot of these kids, make sure you get your family straight, so there's no distractions from that standpoint. You do your media obligations, and then after that, it's all football. There's no partying, there's no anything. Maybe go out to dinner with your family one night, a couple of nights, but you try to keep everything as normal as possible.
What's the biggest change from the time that you were drafted? I know you only retired 2009, right, a few years ago, but you got drafted late 90s. What's the biggest change in the game since then?
Wow, I think they're doing it for a lot of different reasons, but the game was so much more physical back then. And just the running game, guys, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We just talked about it earlier about how the passing game has evolved. And one of the things that, back in the day was so physical, training camp. I remember with Dick Vermeil, 3-hour practices, and now these guys barely hit. So the game has changed from a physical standpoint so much that it's kind of, it doesn't even. I could have played a couple more years under this system if we didn't have as much contact.
One of the big things around the NFL now too, and football in general, is concussions, is head injuries. Not really knowing, so little that we know about the science. What was the climate for you in your locker room, guys that you played with, when it came to injuries and hits to the head?
Well, it was the climate back in the day was, you always want to be tough. If you can get out there and play, you can play. Now that over the years, teams are getting more knowledge. They got doctors. They kind of screen you differently now. So I think the game's safer, which is good for the players today. But guys were always trying to be tough back in the day. And if you got dinged, you try to get back out there. But now there's certain protocol you have to go to get back on the field, which is good for the game.
Is it scary to think about some of the stuff that maybe you guys put yourself through because you were supposed to be tough?
You know what? I know it. It's really difficult. But, if you ask those guys that played, my era was tough. But those guys even in the 60s or 70s that played, now that era was really tough. If they had an opportunity to do it again, would they do it again? And probably 99% of those guys would say yes, because when you're in it, you don't see it as much. Now, for me, I watch a game now, I'm like, ooh, that's a big hit. But, so it's one of those things where when you're in it and you're playing the game, you don't really recognize how physical that game is.
Well, Orlando Pace, congratulations on being now in the club, and we're just going to have to figure out where the gold jacket is, right?
I know, you told me Derek Brooks and Andre Reed are walking around with
Mike
his jacket.
Haynes, he's got his on.
I didn't get the memo. I'm going to have to get the memo next year. They didn't give the rookie the memo this year, man. So next year you'll definitely see me with the gold jacket.
All right, well, enjoy the weekend. The Spoils being part of that Hall of Fame club. It's great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.